But that being said, this next story is a bit more of good news. From the Washington Examiner, Joe Rogan will never have Trump on podcast, not interested in helping him. Now, that isn't the story I'm actually pointing out. You have to dig a little deeper to see what the big story is, and it's where Joe Rogan says Trump is running against a dead man. That's the important point. Joe Rogan has praised Ron DeSantis, saying he'd be a good president. He doesn't want to help Trump. But if the regular person, if Joe Rogan is the barometer for UFC commentator, mainstream comedian, I'd be willing to bet Joe Rogan is where most Americans probably are. And they are not far left. They are tired of the woke stuff. They don't like Donald Trump. Ron DeSantis would probably be all right. That's good news. It means that cult may have been breaking itself so far off from the mainstream America that eventually they're going to lose money, run out, and then they're not going to be a part of the economy anymore. And when that market dries up, people start walking away. I have to imagine with Joe Rogan being who he is for the past several years, saying what he said, a lot of regular people are moving away from that stuff. They're getting out of it. So he's not threatening Joe Biden by calling him a dead man, but he's basically pointing out that Joe's not going to win. He can't win. Right.
I think Joe's been saying that for a while, though, hasn't he?
Rogan?
Yeah.
Yeah.
About Biden. So.
Oh, yeah, no, for sure. I just mean like here's the latest context around it.
So does he mean I'm not interested in helping Trump because Trump doesn't need any help at this point?
Like he doesn't like him.
He has no competition.
He's saying he doesn't. I think Joe says I'm not a Trump supporter. I'm not going to help him out. I'm not going to have him on the show. Now that says to me, Joe Rogan's taking a hard political stance, because for me, as you know, as a host of a show, I actually don't care about helping someone or hurting someone. That's ridiculous. No offense to Joe. My attitude is, if we're going to have a conversation and talk about these things, and we need to, well, maybe it'll help you or not. But it's interesting what Joe's saying right there. That if Trump goes on his show, it will help Trump. What does that mean? It means that Trump is more correct, that Trump will expose the media's lies, and that will help him. Obviously, it'll give him exposure. But if Trump was wrong about everything, going on his show would expose him, right? It would hurt him, wouldn't it? Right?
Yeah, that makes sense. That
Joe
logically checks out.
Joe thinks Trump is right to a certain degree. Maybe not on everything. Maybe he doesn't think he's a good person. But he thinks enough that if Trump were to come on his show, it would benefit him.
Or at the very least, he just thinks that Trump is a very convincing person.
Maybe. But I think the reality is Joe knows that Rogan knows Biden is out of it. And that people elected a guy who was burning this country to the ground because they hate Trump. Trump will come on. Trump will say, remember 2019? Remember this policy? Remember when I did this? And people are going to be like, that's true. And there's a reality to what Donald Trump was doing when he was president that, man, he had a potty mouth. He was not a nice guy in a lot of ways. He's a nice guy in a lot of ways, but not a nice guy in a lot of ways, And I think if people start hearing what Trump has to say on a platform like that, it will greatly help Trump, not because he's just convincing, but because he's right.
It would help Trump in general to have more public showings. I haven't even seen him talk, and I think I saw one interview with him in the last 2 years. I'm kind of with Joe on this, in that I think about having Donald on this podcast because it would be great for the podcast. It'd have huge numbers. Two, whatever. It's a political,
and that's all that matters is feeding fodder to.
Part of me
base,
is like,
right?
wow, the profitability of selling out. Wow, but I don't. Never really. I mean, Trump's just he's like divisive. I don't know. I don't hate him, but I'd have Biden on the show too. It's not like I hate the guy.
You'd have them both on.
Yeah, because of the political prowess, because they have been the president of the United States.
You could have some interesting conversations with either one.
I would love to have Biden on this show.
It'd be great.
I would rather have Biden than Trump. Because I just so Burisma, Victor Shokin, Mykola Zlochevsky, let's talk Ukraine, buddy.
You'd be like, I gotta go.
Yeah, he'd be like, I'm leaving. With Trump, I'd say stuff like, I disagree with your fraud narrative. I'd ask him questions. But Trump's issue is that they call him a liar all the time. And I'm like, maybe he's just wrong. Trump lies about dumb ego stuff, like how big and famous he is and things like that. I don't care about that.
He makes big promises too, with I think no idea of how to follow through. Like, I'm gonna drain the swamp. What did that even mean? Did he even have an idea of what that meant? Because he didn't fire a lot of people.
There was an actual pool outside the White House that he was actually
the swamp that he. I see. So we're still waiting on that.
I kept my promise.
I did drain the swamp, by the way.
The septic system at the White House.
You can go swimming now.
I can ask Trump So, like, the things I could criticize Trump over is, like, the State Department was advertising Trump properties in the UK. That's not okay. Trump tried using Doral in Florida for, I think it was the G7. That's not okay. Trump eventually rescinded that and said, okay, I won't do it. I thought I was going to save him money. And I'm like, it's conflict of interest. But he was pulling our troops out of the Middle East. Like, the one thing you can really get him for is, like, you're kind of a dick to a lot of people, and people didn't like that, but so is Joe Biden. Joe Biden launched his campaign off the Very Fine People hoax. It was a hoax. That's the craziest thing. His campaign video was that Donald Trump praised white nationalists, which never happened. He made it up to make people hate. That is psychotic.
I think they're both kind of a dick. Like, Biden was really mean to that guy who was asking him about something, like
the gun control guy.
Yeah, and he just like lashed
He
out.
lashes out at people a lot, but maybe it's just because senility.
That could be part of it. Well, he's done it for years. I remember.
He points his finger in people's face.
Yeah,
so aggressive.
Like, if he was doing it in private, okay, maybe then I would question. But he did it in public on TV, right in front of the world,
which is what makes him seem senile. Like, do you know that people are watching you act crazy right now?
Well, it's like
it feels like immunity.
And the way he puts his finger in people's faces, like, you're asking.
Yeah,
for
it's
it.
really aggressive.
I
Like the
was
kind of guy
weird.
that'll grab your
Weird.
arm really tight till it hurts.
Yeah.
I was going to say the way he puts his hands on women's shoulders and sniffs their heads is a bit worse
Not
than the
women,
finger.
children.
Well, children as well, yes. Yeah. What a creepy, awful man. You know, look, Donald Trump, locker room talk, all those nasty things. I'm not a fan of any of it. And there's a lot of people who really love Trump for who he is. His diehard supporters, they're like, we're glad there's a guy in there who's going to tell people. And I've laughed. I understand what funny is. When he called Stormy horseface, when he said only Rosie O'Donnell, you know, when he called, who did he call? He called someone a fat pig. I don't know.
I think
It's
so.
something
yeah.
along those lines, I think.
Entertaining, funny celebrity drama. Me personally, I'm like, maybe not in the White House.
Yeah,
You know?
definitely
Well, it happened.
not in the White
Too
House.
late.
I know it happened.
We need lawyers in the White House and legal analysts and scientists and things like
lawyers.
that. Like Obama,
Too many lawyers.
How many? One of the things isn't every single lawyer joke about them being in hell?
I thought Obama's
Pretty much.
Obama was a constitutional lawyer, I believe. He's and that was valuable. You know, he wasn't an idiot when it came
Yeah,
to
yeah.
constitutional
He was
law.
like,
he
if
knew
you're
what
like-
to circumvent to get things done. That's
And,
for sure.
and I remember when he said, if you're like me, I will know all the legal loopholes for blown up kids. Too many of them.
But we do need
That's what he
people
did.
that understand the
Blew 'em up.
Constitution in the White House that respect the Constitution. I think constitutionalists maybe is a better phrase than lawyers.
I think Trump is what you get when the people are neglected for too long. And I went to these Trump rallies, and there are so many people who are like, I've never voted before, but I'm voting for this man because he's finally sticking it to the machine. The Republicans and Democrats were snooty elites who thought they were better than everyone else, and that needed to change. So now you've got the Trump populists, the left populists hate the Democrats and hate the Republicans, but support the Democrats because they hate the Republicans more, which is dumb. But the whole thing is just kind of it's falling apart. I actually think Ron DeSantis could probably save the country, but I don't know if he'll actually reform it to the degree it needs to be reformed. He would just stop it from imploding. You know what I mean?
He does seem to have the same sort of ability to make Trump-like changes, but without his tweets.
But I don't think he'd go as far as we need him to. I also, fair point. You know, Ian brought this up. I don't know if Trump would drain the swamp either. He didn't do it the first time. He brought more swamp monsters, and he got rid of some of them, but brought more in. Maybe he was getting jammed up by the Russiagate stuff, and he couldn't do it. He might win re-election and then say, okay, now I've got one more term. I don't have to worry about the swamp, so I'm going to ignore it. You know?
Yeah.
And if he doesn't go in there and fire everybody, then what's the point? Then Ron DeSantis, I think, would do better.
No, I mean, I think you were right about his foreign policy stuff because he was trying to stop the war, a lot of the war in the Middle East. You know, maybe heavy-handedly, like moving the Israeli, what was it? What did he move to Jerusalem? He moved the embassy?
The embassy.
Which was basically saying, hey, Palestinians, F you. You know, it's basically like picking a side in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict by putting it in Jerusalem and saying, like, this is an Israeli embassy in Jerusalem, which is supposed to be split between the Israelis and the Palestinians. So that was like some kind of brute force ignorance, I think, politically.
Oh, the conservatives loved it.
Of course.
They've been waiting
Half
for
of the
that.
people loved it. The other half of the people are like, what the heck?
One of the things Joe Rogan brought up in this interview with Lex Friedman, that's where the quotes come from, is that there were people who abandoned all principle and logic to attack Trump and his supporters because he was a threat to democracy or something. It was legitimately insane the way they lied about Trump all day, every day. And there was a meme among centrists, stop making me defend Trump. It was people who are like, I don't like him either, but yo, that's not true. There's a really funny skit someone did, and they were like, why are you saying that? Are you a Trump supporter? No, that didn't happen. And they were like, you support Trump. It's like, okay, dude. I don't know how we're supposed to survive as a country if you can't even just be like, this is what's true, this is what's not true. Nobody wanted journalism, they wanted confirmation bias, and that was the cult.
Well, I think one place where I've started to see a change is in my corner of YouTube, which is live streaming trials. Starting with the Rittenhouse trial, that was the first eye-opener for a lot of people to say, oh, the media is lying to me about everything that happened in Kenosha that night. And then more recently, but those were people that were of a particular political demographic, more people on the right. Now we have the Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard trial, where people are saying the same thing, but they span the entire political spectrum. I mean, I have people that are literal socialists that are saying the media is lying to us about this. What else are they lying to us about?
Good.
So it's if you're looking for a potential ground for change on social media or on the internet in generally, that could be one of those places.
Yeah, the mega corporate internet media or the mega corporate media apparatus is
it's just the reporting on these trials is just so different. And when people have the ability to actually watch them for themselves and to evaluate the evidence, evaluate the arguments that are put in front of them, and to understand the law that's actually at play, they're able to come to their own conclusions. And this is, I think, one of the reasons why channels like mine, like Ricada Law, like Viva Fry, Emily D. Baker, a bunch of other people in LawTube, like we like to call it, the reason why these channels are growing is because we're giving people the ability to make their own conclusions using the evidence and just sort of like acting as almost like law Sherpas to like guide them through the process.
Yeah, I think schooling is kind of obtuse in a lot of ways. Like they make people go to medical school for 12 years or something to learn how to do something that you could really learn how to do, regardless of the amount of time it's going to take you. You could learn how to do it. Same with law. If you can learn the info, why do you have to spend $600,000 in 11 years or whatever, 8 years? Like, so you guys are kind of teaching. Yeah, you guys are kind of teaching the information without the badge.
Yeah.
You know, without.
And the process too. Like that actually is the part that I think is more confounding to most people, is not so much the actual information, but the legal process. Like, what is trial actually like? What is litigation actually like? Because, well, everybody comes in contact with the law, regardless of whether they're in litigation at some point in their lives or not. But most people will come in contact with a legal process at some point as well, whether that's criminal law or litigation, like civil litigation or probate. Somebody's parent dies and they have to administer a trust, or a will or something like that. And automatically part of it is the expense, but automatically there's a lot of fear for most people. So, if you can help people understand the process that they are about to enter into, it eliminates a lot of fear. Like I had somebody on Twitter that tweeted at me and several others saying, I am a DV survivor. I'm supposed to testify against my abuser, next week or next month or something like that. And now after having watched the Depp v. Heard trial with all of you guys, I have way less fear about what to expect because I understand the process now.
Did you see the journalists during the Amber, the Depp and Heard thing where they were like, I can't remember who it was, but they said the court actually claimed that there was malice. Look at what Johnny Depp did to her. And it's like, they have no idea what they're talking about. Yeah. They don't look at the legal filings or the language and say, what does that mean?
Yeah.
They say, I know what it means. I don't need assistance. And malice legally does not mean the same thing as malice colloquially.
Right.
So
actual malice specifically.
Actual malice.
Yeah.
So these journalists are writing nonsense. And they're like, the court actually claimed there was malice despite Johnny Depp having been accused of doing X, Y, and Z. Yeah. And it's like, that has nothing to do with what the court's saying.
Yeah. Yeah.
The court's saying she knew what she was saying, or either she knew what she was saying was wrong or was reckless disregard for the truth.
Yeah.
That's it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
When Roe v. Wade dropped, you know what I did? I was like, whoa, I better call a lawyer. It's crazy. I think that the big difference between the corporate press today and whatever this show is and whatever your show is that we're very much like, hey, we're probably wrong. Let's ask experts and see what they have to say about this. Journalism. Now, mainstream corporations are like, we know, because we're smart and you're dumb.
It's a very scientific method form of journalism. Assume that you're wrong until you can replicate it and figure out what exactly it is. Mm-hmm. That's the way it should be done, I think.
Should be, but isn't. So now I guess going back 6-7 years, trust in the press has been at all-time lows. So good, fine, but they're still getting tons of money. They're still controlling the news cycle. They're still manipulating the narrative, and we got to change that and take it over. I've been thinking about this, and the interesting thing is, millennials are going to take over soon. You've got boomers are starting to retire out. Gen Xers are taking the reins. However, for some reason, Gen X is just ignored. Have you noticed this? Like, there's never a part of the conversation. It's like, hey, millennials are going to start inheriting these machines. And you look at people like Taylor Lorenz. Yeah, she's a millennial. She is.
Is she? I'm sorry. I don't mean that as a joke. I mean that actually, because I know that there's a lot about her age, and I'm just genuinely confused. Okay.
Well, to the best of our understanding.
Okay. I think she lied about her age once as a joke, and now it's got everyone twisted and confused.
Okay.
Bill Maher, in referencing the Washington Post fighting with Felicia Sonmez, said, "This is why millennials, we don't want you to take over, because you're a bunch of whiny, entitled brats." And the Felicia Sonmez thing was hilarious. Did you see that one? You guys know this?
Yeah, it was happening around the same time.
Dave Weigel, their star reporter, or a star reporter, retweeted a joke where it said, the joke was, every woman is bi, you just have to figure out if it's polar or sexual. And so he retweeted that. She complained. He got suspended without pay. She would not stop attacking the company. She gets fired. Bill Maher was like, this is the problem with millennials. Well, it's the problem with the millennials, the institutions. I'll tell you this. The millennials who aren't there have started companies. They're becoming successful. They're working in separate industries. And it's, the problem is that Bill Maher, he missed this. He's like, millennials, oh, look at them at the Washington Post. Like, yeah, we don't associate with them either, and we're millennials. We're starting our own businesses. We're starting our own channels. We're starting our own websites. We're building up our own subscription bases. The people who can't do that are begging the Washington Post for a job and then crying all day until they're fired. See the difference? So the Washington Post will probably crumble under the girth of its entitlement from millennials, and then the Daily Wire, Timcast, Legal Bites, Viva Fry, all of these channels are going to start growing, hiring people, expanding, or remaining as independent personalities who can fund themselves.
As you were saying that, I was thinking of, I think it's less about what generation you were born in and more about your state of mind. There are a lot of independent creators that span age 80 to age 11 or age 17. But that people that are born more recently have been born more in a nanny state. Basically, it's like a technocracy that they're trying to build, where it's like a spy state, and so they have this appeal to authority, where you may be more likely to appeal to authority, or may find yourself around people that are more likely to. Not that you're bound by your generation to behave a certain way, but it's just the nature of the gradient has been shifting.
I think right now, if you want to be rich, it's simple: make not woke content. That's it.
Yeah,
and a platform you can do it on, I suppose. So if you start a Rumble channel, do comedy. That's it. So much comedy is just really, really awful. I think Rogan was also talking about this, that woke comics are just really bad. Just maybe it wasn't Rogan. Probably Rogan.
I feel like I've heard him say something.
I don't
along
know
those
if
lines
anti-woke
before.
comics are that much better. Right?
But look, if your comic is obsessed with wokeness, that's their whole bit, maybe.
Yeah, but I mean, being anti-woke is like such an obsession too now.
But I'm not saying like woke comics aren't always joking about race and white supremacy. They're avoiding these subjects. So there was one video I watched where it was a woke comic and he was mocking himself. And I'm like, it's just not funny. I mean, I guess Rodney Dangerfield, self-deprecating humor and all that stuff can work. But then you watch people, anti-woke, I don't mean they're comics who are literally attacking woke people. I mean, Ryan Long, for instance. He's anti-woke. Not that he comes out every bit and just makes fun of wokeness, but that he's willing to tell offensive jokes that don't fall in line with wokeness. You know what I mean?
Would you say Dave Chappelle and like Ricky Gervais
Sort
are those
of.
types of comics?
Kind of. For the most part, the willingness to be offensive and you know, Dave Chappelle did a bit in his comedy special back in 2018 where he did like a Chinese stereotype and it was just really old school racist Chinese stereotype and everyone laughed at it. Like that's anti-woke, right? Like he was purposefully poking people and being offensive, but in his most recent special, he was real defensive. They got him run for his money. So Ryan Long's got a bit right now where he's a singer saying that it's women's right to get an abortion, specifically one woman, and then he names a woman who he's like, I accidentally knocked up, and you better get an abortion. So it's funny. That's comedy. That's the joke. But it's as offensive as you can get when he does his routines. That's anti-wokeness. disregard for wokeness, ignoring it. It's funny. I think that stuff's gonna keep growing and working. I mean, we're talking. So we do the Cast Castle vlog. If you haven't subscribed, go to youtube.com/castcastle. And we're doing skits and bits, and it's relatively family-friendly stuff and silly slapstick humor. And, like Mary's like lurking in the closet, in the attic for some reason, like some weirdo.
Like screaming, flashing the light.
Yeah, stuff like that. But we've been talking about, even with Seamus from Freedom Tunes. Seamus mentioned this. We had a couple of them, that YouTube would never allow that are actually family-friendly. But they offend the political sensibilities of YouTube. We had vaccine jokes. Like just mocking the political, air around it and stuff like that. And we were like, yeah, if we made that skit, it would not be offensive to any parent. Children could watch it and ask their parents what it meant. It wasn't lewd or anything like that. It was just, about politics. But YouTube would delete it for wrongthink. That's the crazy thing. So that means there's a huge market for humor on Rumble. So if you do comedy, just start making Rumble videos and they'll go viral because people are looking for things to laugh at. The Daily Wire is growing so rapidly because the hole in the market is so big that I think the Daily Wire's got 4 or 5 movies and they're close to 1 million subscribers. 4 or 5. Hey, the opportunity is right, man. People don't want this stuff. Just got to do it.
Well, that's why I was saying earlier is that, sometimes people will have an oversaturation and there will be a reaction to that. So with that comes an opening in the market for people to try to get something, some kind of a product or a service that otherwise fills the void that exists because everybody else is oversaturating that market, being wokeism.
Yeah, I'm just wary of anyone who's trying to sell something anti-woke, anti-cancel culture, but doing so while sanitizing the entire topic. I think Piers Morgan Uncensored does exactly that.
Oh, he's awful.
He's like, I'm canceling cancel culture.
It's so
you're
canon
not
fake.
Threatening anything. You're not pushing any boundary, and no one is afraid of appearing on Piers Morgan Uncensored.
Yeah, it's it's gimmicky.
It's cheap. It doesn't mean anything to anyone.
I mean, even the after show that we do is moderately okay. We'll swear a lot and we'll say things that offend delicate woke sensibilities, but even we are not extreme edgelords just trying to poke the bear as hard as possible. We're just trying to speak freely, Piers Morgan it's uncensored, but it's as normie as you're gonna get. He's like, let's talk about this controversial subject. It's everyone's talking about that. Jordan Peterson was talking about that 5 years ago. Come on, man. But outside of, when we're talking about comedy, I'm not saying, if somebody makes a show where their whole shtick is woke people bad, it's okay, we get it. Just make good stuff. Terror on the Prairie, the Daily Wire's movie, it's not a bunch of, woke people on horseback with purple hair ride up and they're like, oh no, we got to fight back. It's just a Western. It's just a Western. And there's a woman and she's like, I'm going to fight. They were like, we made a movie. It's a story. That's it. It's not anti-woke. It's not woke. It's just a movie.
Yeah, if you have a field of crops and all the crops are dying, the way to combat that isn't by making fun of dying crops. It's to grow crops the right way.
Exactly. That's it.
It's a good metaphor.
Well, that's why we started Pop Culture Crisis. It's because I was like, look, the 2 things we don't want to do is make woke content. That's a given. We don't like it. But also anti-woke content where all we do is just be like, oh, look at this, look at that. It comes up. And Seth Rogan said a thing on Twitter. We'll be like, oh, that was dumb. But it's not like we dedicate everything to just going after wokeness. That's what it was very much like in the early YouTube era. And I feel that's why a lot of those early YouTubers bowed out, quit, or failed. It's like, dude, you can't have your whole identity be based on someone else's identity.
That's true.
You need your own. You need to stand up for what you believe in and talk about that stuff. That's why I also really don't like talking about people like Taylor Lorenz and stuff. Granted, she specifically represents a very powerful brand. She was in a high position until she got demoted. And so that's more representation of institutional power. But I try to keep it to the news and the info, and so that we can have a real conversation around this stuff,
Yeah. It's exhausting to try and make a career off of talking about what's wrong with other things, because then you're always looking for new problems, and to the point where you may be happy to see them get created. It's insane. Insane way to live. It's not healthy, I don't think.
That's a very good point.
Thanks for checking out this segment from the Timcast IRL podcast. But if you want to check out the full show live, tune in Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. And if you want more special access content, head over to timcast.com and become a member. Your membership helps sustain this company, keep our journalists employed, makes this show happen, and you will get access to exclusive members-only segments of the Timcast IRL podcast, and there's a massive library to check out. So again, go to timcast.com or tune in Monday through Friday at 8 p.m., and we'll see you all there.